Easy now. I didn't mean to scare you. Are you all right, ma'am?
We're just resting here, mister. We'll be gone by morning.
No les haré daño. Vengan, están a salvo.
Margaret Ellen Hayes turned 37 on a cold November morning in the small town of Willowbrook, Montana. She stood at her kitchen window, watching the frost creep across the glass, while her mother's words echoed in her mind. Too plain, too quiet, too old now. The words had been spoken at the dinner table the night before, and they had settled into Margaret's chest like stones. She had stopped counting the rejections years ago. There had been Thomas Miller when she was 22, who had courted her for 3 months before announcing he preferred her younger sister. There had been Robert Walsh at 26, who had written her beautiful letters until he discovered she came with no dowry. There had been Samuel Green at 31, who had proposed and then withdrawn his offer when a prettier woman arrived in town. After Samuel, Margaret had simply stopped hoping. She took a position as the town seamstress, working from a small shop attached to her modest cottage. She sewed wedding dresses for other women. She mended trousers for other women's husbands. She stitched christening gowns for other women's babies. And she told herself she was content. But contentment and happiness are not the same thing, and Margaret knew the difference well. On that November morning, she was measuring fabric for Mrs. Patterson's new Sunday dress when the bell above her shop door rang. She looked up, expecting to see one of her regular customers. Instead, she saw a man she had never met before. He was tall with broad shoulders and hands that showed years of hard work. His hair was dark with streaks of gray at the temples, and his face carried the weathered look of someone who spent his days under open skies. He removed his hat as he stepped inside, and Margaret noticed his boots were caked with mud from the road. "I am looking for Miss Margaret Hayes," he said. His voice was deep but gentle, like distant thunder that brings rain instead of destruction. Margaret set down her measuring tape. "I am Margaret Hayes. How can I help you?" The man shifted his weight from one foot to the other. He seemed uncomfortable, which struck Margaret as odd, given his imposing size. "My name is William Dawson. I own a ranch about 40 miles east of here, near the Blackfoot River. I have traveled 2 days to speak with you." Margaret felt confusion wash over her. She had never heard of William Dawson. She had no connections to any ranch near the Blackfoot River. She could not imagine what business this stranger could possibly have with her. "I think perhaps you have the wrong person," she said. William shook his head. "No, ma'am. I asked in town for the seamstress named Margaret Hayes, and 3 different people pointed me to this shop. You are the woman I came to see." Margaret gestured to the chair beside her work table. "Then please sit down and tell me what brings you here." William sat, though the delicate chair looked almost comical beneath his large frame. He turned his hat over in his hands several times before speaking. "I have a daughter," he began. "Her name is Lucy. She is 7 years old. Her mother, my wife Catherine, passed away 3 years ago from fever. Since then, it has been just Lucy and me on the ranch." Margaret felt her heart soften at the mention of the child. She waited for him to continue. "I am a good rancher," William said. "I can raise cattle and horses. I can build fences and repair barns. I can predict weather by the color of the sky. But I cannot do what Lucy needs. I cannot teach her to be a young lady. I cannot braid her hair the way her mother used to. I cannot sew her dresses or help her understand the things a girl needs to understand as she grows. He paused and met Margaret's eyes directly. I have asked around in every town within 100 miles. I have asked about women who might be willing to come to a remote ranch and help raise a child. Your name came up more than once. Margaret's confusion deepened. My name? How would anyone know my name? That far from Willowbrook. Do you remember making a wedding dress for a woman named Sarah Pickford about 5 years ago? Margaret thought back. Yes, Sarah had been a kind young woman who had married a cattle buyer and moved east. Sarah is my cousin, William explained. She wrote to me when she heard I was searching. She said, "You were the kindest woman she had ever met," she said. When she could not afford the buttons she wanted for her dress, you gave them to her for free and pretended you had ordered too many by mistake. Margaret remembered that day. Sarah had been so embarrassed about her lack of funds, and Margaret had not wanted her to feel shame on what should have been a happy occasion. Sarah also said you had no husband, William continued. She said the men in this town were fools who could not see what was right in front of them. Margaret felt heat rise to her cheeks. She did not know how to respond to such a statement from a stranger. William leaned forward slightly. Miss Hayes, I am not a man of pretty words. I cannot offer you poetry or romance, but I cannot offer you a home, a child who needs a mother's love, and a husband who will treat you with respect every single day. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. Are you proposing marriage to a woman you met 5 minutes ago? I am, William said simply. But I am not asking you to answer today. That would be unfair. I am asking if you would be willing to come to my ranch for 2 weeks. Meet Lucy, see the life I am offering, and then decide. This was the unusual request, not a proposal of love, but a proposal of purpose. Not a promise of passion, but a promise of partnership. Margaret thought of her small shop, her lonely cottage, her mother's cutting words. She thought of the 37 years behind her and the unknown years ahead. She thought of all the wedding dresses she had sewn for other women and all the christening gowns she had stitched for other women's children. And then she thought of a 7-year-old girl on a distant ranch who needed someone to braid her hair. I will come for 2 weeks, Margaret said, but I make no promises beyond that. William's face broke into a smile that transformed his weathered features. That is all I ask. 3 days later, Margaret closed her shop and climbed into William's wagon. The journey took 2 full days over rough roads, and they talked the entire time. William told her about his ranch, about his cattle, about the way the mountains looked when the sun set behind them. He told her about Catherine, how they had built their life together from nothing, how her death had nearly broken him, and Margaret found herself telling him things she had never told anyone. About the rejections, about the loneliness, about the way she had learned to make herself small so her disappointments would feel smaller too. William listened to every word. He did not interrupt. He did not offer empty reassurances. He simply listened, and somehow that was enough. When they arrived at the ranch, Lucy was waiting on the porch. She was a small girl with her father's dark hair and curious eyes that studied Margaret with cautious hope. Are you going to be my new mother? Lucy asked directly. Margaret knelt down to meet the child's eyes. I am going to be your friend first. We will see what happens after that. Lucy considered this answer, then nodded. She reached out and took Margaret's hand. Your fingers are rough like Papa's. That is because I work hard, Margaret said. Just like your Papa. Lucy smiled then, a smile so bright and genuine that Margaret felt something crack open in her chest. Something that had been closed for a very long time. The 2 weeks passed faster than Margaret could have imagined. She taught Lucy to sew simple stitches. She learned to collect eggs from the chickens without getting pecked. She cooked meals in the ranch kitchen while Lucy sat at the table, telling her stories about the horses. And every evening, William would come in from the fields, tired and dusty, and his face would light up when he saw them together. On the 14th day, William found Margaret standing by the pasture fence, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. He stood beside her in silence for a long moment. "You could stay," he said finally. It was not a demand. It was an invitation. Margaret thought about Willowbrook. She thought about her empty shop, and her lonely cottage, and her mother's disappointed sighs. Then she thought about Lucy's laughter, and William's quiet kindness, and the way this place already felt more like home than anywhere she had ever been. "I think I will," she said. William reached over and took her hand. His grip was warm and steady. They were married 3 months later, in a small ceremony on the ranch. Margaret wore a dress she had sewn herself, with buttons she had been saving for years without knowing why. And Lucy stood beside them, holding flowers she had picked from the meadow, smiling that bright smile that had cracked open Margaret's heart and let the light back in.